Okay, now we have a full complement, or as full as it's going to be. All right, I'll proceed to call the meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Historic Resources Commission of the City of Albany, and this is a public workshop session that we're having this evening. We would certainly invite comment at a designated time, as long as the comments remain on the topic at hand and are limited to 3 minutes in duration. This evening in attendance, John Myers, the chair, myself, Chris Hacker, commissioner, Commissioner Jennifer Garrity, Commissioner Jack McEnany, Commissioner Marilyn Kaplan, and Commissioner Aaron Tobin. Aaron Glennon is present representing the commission and the planning office, and Amy Levine is representing the law department, keeping us honest. So with that, I declare we do have a quorum, although we're not conducting business or rendering a decision. So it's good to see everyone, and we can proceed with the meeting. I think this is, as Aaron said, it's a public workshop, and we're discussing a case for an upcoming meeting of the HRC on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day.
So this is our first kind of application workshop that we've done. Planning board and BZA use it as a time for the boards to provide feedback to the applicants, whether there's missing information, there needs to be clarification or further documents provided. And if there are questions, the project architects are here, and I believe someone is also here from the Salvation Army. But so 452 Clinton Avenue, it is owned by the Salvation Army as part of a larger project. In order to stay in their current location, they are proposing to replace the existing windows that were installed most likely in the 1970s or 1980s. And they're proposing to use 1/1 aluminum windows and replace the metal infill panels with ephes infill panels, fairly similar to the current panel pattern. I did have a pre-application meeting with the project architects prior to the submission. We did go over the options that are available at the property. I was informed that the Salvation Army does not have funding to go back to a window that is similar to what was most likely the historic window, and there is no currently, I have been unable to find, and I believe Emily Connors, who's one of the project architects or project managers for this, has been unable to find any documentation showing the historic windows. But using a window that fills the original fenestration opening is outside of the budget. So we did discuss going with a panel system similar to what is there, or possibly they said there's a possibility of even creating like a panel with a grid system to kind of reflect a window. I did advise that, because there's no documentation of what was originally there, just creating a grid system would, not based off of any evidence, wouldn't be appropriate, and going with a simpler option would, at the time, unless we have documentation, would be the better option. So what, they did submit what's currently shown in the drawings as a simple panel system with 1/1 sash windows. And the proposal is being reviewed under the general guidelines, the rehabilitation guidelines, and the window standards under the rehabilitation guidelines, under the historic resource overlay review criteria. So I guess if any of you do have any questions, or
What was the building originally?
it was a cigar manufacturing building.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Is there a blue form for the building?
There is, I don't believe I did not include it in the presentation. I can send it out, but what the blue form shows is fairly similar to this. At the time, it's from the late 1970s or possibly 1983, I believe. And what it shows is windows with the panel system similar to what's there. The only difference is that on the first floor, those 3 large openings were actually storefronts. Were like an aluminum and glass storefront.
Okay.
In the 3 center openings.
Erin, what is our, I'm sorry, I don't know this off the top of my head, but as a commission, we can only respond to what's there now, not what once was there, right? Like, even if we wanted to recommend it, I don't say,
yep,
we can't tell them, anybody, to put something back that it no longer exists.
Right. And that was my feedback to them, was that we can't, there's no evidence of what was there originally. If there was documentation, then yes, we would encourage them to replicate what was originally there. But because there's no evidence, the standards, and let me pull them up, they're in the packets, but the standards pretty much say, and I had to send this out for a different application. When there is no evidence of the original window, the new one should be complementary to the building design, which is slightly open-ended, but
Can you go back to the first photo that we saw?
I'm looking at the paragraph B in the Windows section that you had included with the packet, and it talks about a replacement window should match size of the original opening, and width, length, depth, placement should be constructed to the configuration of the existing or original window. And you're right, we don't have any evidence of what the original window is.
right.
It does go on to say, in the event that a previously altered non-compatible window is being replaced on a street-facing facade, the new window should conform with the original opening and be of a style, color, and material appropriate to the building. When there is no evidence of the original window, the new one should be complementary to the building design.
Yes.
So it leaves a lot of wiggle room in there to interpret, but clearly we have a situation where, the building had been significantly altered in its appearance, and you always look at these as opportunities to resurrect what could have been the original.
Is this like a 1910 building? What's the date on the building?
I'd have to pull the blue form, Jack.
I
It's early turn of the century is what.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't believe that a building that substantial, that we have no idea what it looked like, at least as far as the the windows are concerned. It's, you know, you would think it
I'm
would
surprised as well.
have
But
shown up as an advertisement, even for an ad somewhere.
I wonder if Tony Alpalka would have anything from his long ago work on Clinton Ave.
We can find out.
Yeah. It's,
John, would you read that again? About the second half?
Yeah, the second half, it said, in the event that a previously altered non-compatible window is being replaced on a street-facing facade, the new window should conform to the original opening and be of a style, color, and material appropriate to the building. When there is no evidence of the original window, the new one should be complementary to the building design.
So I actually find that direction pretty clear. And whether it's and staring at this photograph, it is the reveal of the windows against the brick, which feels to be much of what defines the building. And so whether they were a large window with a transom or 1/1 or a multi-light, to some degree feels secondary to me than both visually seeing a full, the full use of the opening. And I think that's really what's intended by what you read. That sentence, the last part of the last part, which said compatible with the building.
So I think it's a determination of, you know, within some of the limitations of the project, what would be compatible. I guess the thing that I find is that the proportion of the replacement windows are so squat that they look a little, they're dominated by a blank panel above. And I realize that there are probably areas in the building where ceilings have been dropped, and that poses some serious problems. They probably were a multi-light steel window, you know, illuminating these cigar rolling floors.
So,
Aaron, the interior shot again, so we can kind of take a look at the ceiling.
Yeah. Aaron Tobin, were you gonna?
yeah, I was going to ask, following up on that, are these, yeah, there's the drop. Is there, well, so one looks like it has a drop ceiling and one looks like it doesn't. The right looks like it's got that drop ceiling right there. Yeah. And then see, I can't point and you guys can't see me, but you see the yellow line up above on the left. So it looks like that is a full height space. I have to say I'm struggling with this on so many levels. Because the Salvation Army is very important in that location, does important work. I know that's not what we're charged with. I don't know who made the decision to do this to the building. I feel, you know, at the point that this was done to those windows, that the crime was committed. And I think that just my interest is in how can we fix this reasonably, and you know, is there an economic way to fix it? And I guess I'd also say they're probably horribly inefficient if it's just these panels that you have these huge spots of wall. I mean, I would think that almost a window.
And that is one of the things that was brought up, is that either the windows the windows and panels have currently failed, or they are in a state of failing. So
yeah. So even having a really good window that fills the entire opening that can have a good storm, or, you know, there's plenty of industrial conversions with big windows that, but that's where I'm struggling, is that's a big ask, and I'm not sure I guess, as Marilyn said, our charge is fairly straightforward in the way the ordinance is written. I just, it's a challenging, I don't know, I'm having a hard time.
Erin, could you go back to the exterior, the first one that we've been working with?
Oh, can I ask one more question are we allowed to ask applicants questions yet or not? Because one of my questions would be, I guess I'll just put this out there, are there other funding sources available to help with this project? In any sense, and have they considered any alternative funding sources to help with this project? Because certainly there have been plenty of buildings of this size that have received funds for this type of work, but
Right.
Restoration, rehabilitation kind of a sense.
Emily or Steve, if you want to answer that. I know that we did discuss, they are a nonprofit organization, so tax credits aren't available, but
I don't know about that, because I know years ago, a case where a facade of a building was on the corner of Tentonbrook and Clinton was covered over with the permastone, and the permastone was taken off, and a neighbor wound up taking tax credits for paying for the restoration of the facade. Yes, it's something.
Well, if it was the neighbor and not the organization.
Well, in other words, if there were a better way to do this, to make it more appropriate to bring out the original feeling of the building, it's something that funding from the outside could do that, and then the individual who provided the funding could take that off their taxes.
Erin Tobin and I were on a call maybe 2 weeks ago that Julian Adams from the state office had set up. And the conversation was exactly about how do we use tax credits on projects. And the gentleman from Buffalo that was on the call with us, who had been involved in some community, I think art center is what it was, right?
Mhm.
Projects. But clearly what he said is if you don't, even at $1 million of the project that they were working on, that was at the very, very bottom of where it makes sense to set up the separate LLCs and the accounting and everything else to have someone else get to take the credits for this work. So it's important. Of course, we started the conversation talking about single smaller buildings, but what we heard from his examples with some nonprofits was at $1 million, it was still a real stretch as to whether it was worth it. And I don't think that's what we're talking about here.
And it would have to, to Marilyn's point, just second that, it would have to be a much bigger project. And one could do a rehabilitation of this building of a size that could warrant tax credits, but that's not what the Salvation Army is talking about doing. We're projecting a project onto them, and I can't see their faces, but I'm sure they are not planning on doing that size project. And that's, I think, going to be an issue with the window situation too. If we have all these drop ceilings, what happens to the interiors if, let's say, if they, restored the window, or at least restored glazing to the entire opening?
What is the purpose? What's going to happen to the interior of the building? Just out of curiosity, are they going to be private bedrooms, or are they going to be a dorm?
We could, Steve or Emily, if you want to answer the previous funding question and then answer the interior use question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll speak up. This is Steve Trobe. We do a lot of work for the Salvation Army, and every project, the thing that's similar about every project is they have no money. So we are always, this is almost pro bono work for us. It's very helpful to the community and to the Salvation Army, but it's always a challenge to do things I'd call on a shoestring. But they are committed to this building. You may recall that for a while they were going to move out of this building and out of and they were looking at other properties and couldn't come to an agreement on anything other than this building. And for a long time, they didn't really put resources into this building because they thought they were going to move.
They moved the thrift store out, didn't they?
No, yes, this is now just a sorting facility.
Okay.
So donations come here. But what you don't know about the Salvation Army, and I find this fascinating, sorry if I going on too long, but a big part of their work is called an adult rehabilitation center.
Yeah.
So they house and rehab primarily male adults who have addictions. And all of these upper floors you see here are open areas and semi and private rooms for people who are part of their rehabilitation program. Mm-hmm. And so I'm currently involved in a program in this building, rehabbing all the bathrooms, making them accessible, which hadn't been, they were in horrible condition. But they're doing the inside of the building on that. They are doing the window replacement because you're right, they're incredible. The whole infill panel system is failing. And the third thing they're going to do, which I think is a big investment and great improvement, is all of those air conditioners are going away because they're going to redo the heating and ventilating system of this building, including central air, which I think will be a huge improvement to the exterior. To me, that's almost unheard of in terms of the world of Salvation Army, that they're investing so much money into this building. But again, that's a big lift for them. So they're not doing a lot of interior renovations beyond what's needed for these 3 projects. And the majority of the interior is going to stay like it is with offices, rooms and a chapel and spaces for this rehabilitation program, and a big sorting facility in the back for donations.
Okay.
It's on the first floor, which programmatically.
In the front are, actually, no, the offices are on the second floor. That's all the sorting facility. So even if you had windows on that floor and looked in, you'd see a lot of kind of industrial work with big carts filled with, used clothing and stuff being sorted.
So I look at this and actually, can we see the full proposal and what's proposed for the panels?
I may have to pull up the packet for the panel.
No,
that's okay.
That's all right. Yeah, I guess my real point was, I wonder, our hearts all want to find a solution here that we can approve, kind of as Aaron spoke to, but I don't know how that aligns with the with our requirements, as John read. Looking at what might make this visually more attractive. And now, I'm sorry, Aaron, to ask you to bounce around. If you can go back to the first one. It's
the photo.
Yeah, please. So visually, if it all was able to read when the lights aren't on, of course, as more homogeneous, a dark void within the brick instead of these light green panels.
Mm.
I mean, we can talk about different solutions or talk about the solutions that have been proposed, but I guess maybe my first question is, will we come to a solution based on will we be able to come to a decision based on what's proposed that is aligned with the 2 sentences that John just read? Because if not, so it's a hardship and it takes another path, right? Maybe that's not a terrible thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that is, that is a process forward, when it comes before public hearing. And when you take action on it, you have the ability to deny it, and they will then have the option to come back and apply for financial hardship.
Can they apply for financial hardship off the bat, or do we have to deny it?
The application has to be denied. That's the way the process is set up.
I'm with Marilyn on if we can find, I had to step away for a second while you were talking, Marilyn, but I heard you say, you know, is there some sort of visually compatible? Because I think I find the green and then the windows rather.
Yeah, it makes it stand out
Yeah.
rather than blend.
So is there some way that it can be more visually homogeneous? The other thing I was thinking, which has nothing really to do with HRC necessarily, but you know, there's these big open panels. Could this be an opportunity for public art? Could this be something more something more creative here? Which again, that's pretty far out of our purview, I think, but it's just, this is so bad to me that trying to think of what would be better without, you know, yeah.
Let me ask the question for you all a little bit differently. So this is a large scale building, and actually I would imagine that the hardship could be financially established. I mean, the cost of doing 4 times as much glazing as we have here, or 3 times as much, would be pretty substantial. But my point really is, so we approved it. If we approve this, what happens across the street and the next time we have a window with an infill panel that doesn't fill the full opening and we're asked to approve?
We just did that on the corner of I think Lark and Clinton, where he had shortened all the windows, and
That's still an ongoing case.
yeah, it's the exact same thing now, except that this has already happened and it's happened years ago.
So I think following up on what Marilyn just said, in terms of precedent, it would be the correct, I mean, also because of what the rules say, the correct thing is we deny it, and they kind of have to force the comeback for economic hardship to make that case. And I would imagine the economic hardship would be not only putting the glazing back in those big surrounds, but also what might have to happen on the interior to facilitate that, which would mean demolition of the drop ceilings, perhaps HVAC reconfiguration. Like there's,
Good.
you know, there's a lot that's going on here that makes restoring those windows. I so wish this could be a full-scale rehab project and dive into the tax credits and have this be a big project, but that's not what this is. And I don't think we can ask that.
Is there any thought or traction to looking at this front facade and where it wraps on the 2 ends as something that is treated differently? It's a very large building, and it extends back to certainly far less visible facades. And you know,
Can we see the plan, Aaron?
Focus the attention on the street-facing facade as the ordinance reads.
Elevations, or do you want?
Plan.
All right, give me one.
Yep,
One
thank you.
second.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I think the challenge is that even looking at I mean, I guess the applicant can tell us, right? Because I agree, but there's that whole, you can see
still have the
whole
drop
side of
ceiling issue and, you know, all of the other mitigating circumstances.
Sorry, give me 1 second.
how many windows, well, I think what I'm trying to figure out is how many windows do you have on the project? And should something different occur on the area that John was just speaking of, about how many of those are there? Thank you, Erin.
Yep. You want,
I would have to double check our window schedule, but we're in the 300-400 window range.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't even know what we would do different on that front section, but
Mm.
how many are there approximately? Maybe 20% of 15, 20% or something?
On the very front elevation.
No, and then the returns. The
Oh,
returns,
that whole kind of the original building.
exactly.
It's probably between, it's maybe around 15%. And again, I'm very much.
Yeah, fair enough, fair
Yeah.
enough. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, but I don't know what we would do.
The facade sort of wraps around architecturally too, that there's almost like a block of a pressed together a tower type of thing on each side, the boxes that are the bookends on each side.
Yeah.
The two sides go to get together very well. It's architecturally very pleasing. And then it disappears into a more routine industrial type of thing. But the front, you can see, was designed to be not only what you see on Clinton, but also the first three windows sets on each side to the left and the right,
Right, right.
which is very attractive, the way it's put together.
it looks like over 50 windows, Marilyn,
Oh, thank you. Thank
on
you.
the front, the
Yeah,
3 floors and then the side elevations. The
Great,
ramp.
thanks.
I count about 38, but it's still a substantial number.
Yeah, but what do you want to do with those? I mean, what could you do? You would put a full, something that looked like a full 1/1 or a transom with a large 1/1 below it, but have them blacked out from the interior. I mean, right, I don't know.
if
Yeah, I mean, do you do a large window and then a glazed transom above that is spandrel glass, and everything's in kind of a dark glass so that they do read as voids in that facade.
Do they have to be operable to accommodate the air conditioners?
That's a
Well,
good
the air
question.
conditioners are going away, and they're going to a central system. So, but if they have any occupancy within the building, they would have to be operable.
Yeah.
We are proposing operable windows with a limiter so that they can only be open a few inches to provide fresh air, but
Right.
good safety as well.
Well, this is a workshop, so you can just all keep chewing on it.
I did like the comment, I think it was Marilyn that said that, the color that's around it, which is not bad, but if you got something that blended more, then you restore that enormous amount of void. And right now, it's not close enough to do it. So that when the final windows go in, if they do, they should blend as much as possible, which could recreate the open space, the void that's in between the brick.
Yeah, I think the proposal, and correct me if I'm wrong, was indicating a tan color for the drive-it and a bronze, anodized bronze window.
Yeah.
Which would be a fairly high contrast.
That's a contrast, yeah.
As opposed to making it more uniform in coloration.
You'd rather see them just blend in as much as possible.
This is Steve again. from Pesaro. I mean, whether you like the green or the window shape on that facade, I actually think the lighter color does show the rhythm of the brick moving across the facade and the rhythm of the openings.
Yeah,
Whether it, and
that's not the problem. The problem is if the windows with their thin frames were also of the same color, be it light or dark,
maybe,
it would blend more. It's not a bad color as far as matching the brick. We're just mentally wondering if you could do anything to not have the new windows break it up as much as they do.
I agree in terms of minimizing the contrast of color. But I have another question. If this building were in a different setting, if it was had buildings right up to it on both sides or something like that, we'd wonder if the first floor might be treated differently than the upper floors, right?
Mhm.
But this photo doesn't feel like that's a solution here to me. But I'm not sure why. Is it because, I mean, I think you see the way the building is set back and there's open space around it, you really do see it as a large structure. And it's not quite a pedestrian area where you're more fully engaged with the first floor storefront areas. So I guess that question is somewhat about, we know the functions are different on the first floor and then the upper floors. And so whatever solution is come about, maybe the treatment might be different. Because in fact, on the first floor, at least on the east side, the east side, it looks like there's no windows, right? They're just solid panels.
Yeah. Although
But I don't know that that approach makes sense here.
I think the door went in from there, though. We can't see it because it's blocked by the brick pillar coming up. But that's where you used to walk in there. So
Right. Okay.
I remember the inside of it. It was not an elegant inside. It was very industrial when you went in. And I think that's pretty much the function it's anticipating, with a lot of it because it's the sorting for clothing and other donations.
And as I'm just trying to think about the choices here, and I mean, one thing that occurs to me, and I don't know that this is really, again, you know, we have one thing, which is what we can legally and what our responsibilities are to rule on, but maybe I'm just trying to rectify the choices we have, is if these windows are replaced and the panels are also replaced, you know, we're not getting a rehabilitation, we're not getting any kind of a restoration to what would have been appropriate. It doesn't preclude that from happening in the future. You know, I mean,
Mhm.
ultimately, the window situation, you know, now that it's done, it can be put back at any future point if and when there is a possibility for rehabilitation. So, you know, I'm just trying to wrap my head around perhaps just kind of justifying the decisions with the understanding of the economic situation, that at least, you know,
It's reversible.
it's reversible. I mean, the windows are gone, so what's gone is gone. And
it's not increasing any harm to the original structure.
yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking. It's not increasing harm. It's just a static situation of a replacement of a replacement.
And I think, you know, Aaron and Jack, this kind of goes back to the property on Lark and Clinton Avenue. One of the issues with that is that there was a loss of historic material.
Yes.
Or this is the replacement of non-original material. That's reversible.
Yeah.
Aaron Glennon, what would be the time frame for a financial hardship? So we would deny the project in 2 weeks, right?
Right.
Then what?
Then I guess depending on how quickly they could turn around and produce the information required under the financial hardship, and they could come back in April. Again, we have the option to have this meeting, the first meeting of the month, be both a workshop or a hearing. So, they could come back in a month, or they could come back at the end of April or in May, whenever they have the information ready for you all to review. We could get them back either at a hearing or a workshop hearing meeting.
I guess I forgot the process because we don't do it very often.
Right.
Right.
So we certainly don't encourage it as a means to get to a good solution. So
Right.
who reviews the financial hardship?
So
Not us.
no, it does come back to you. So the way that the process is, written or laid out is that the initial application comes before the Historic Resource Commission to review, and it needs to be denied by the commission. They are then applicants are able to then take that decision and apply for the financial hardship. So it would come back through the planning office, like the initial application, with a request in writing for financial hardship. They have to provide I haven't done many of these either. Mostly we do the demolition hardship requests.
Right.
But I believe it's a comparison of what it would cost to fully restore the windows. And as Aaron Tobin said, I think that would also require information as to whether or not the full restoration would require interior alterations. So full project cost versus the project cost to do what they're currently proposing with the installation of the windows and the infill panels. I think it also requests financial information for like operational costs for the Salvation Army, maybe their budget for doing the work on the building. And we would look at that and make an assessment as to whether or not financially it would be a hardship for them to do a full restoration. And if they've proven the case that, their only option is to proceed with what's currently proposed.
So what happens when we say, okay, we understand, we accept this economic information, et cetera, that you provided, then what?
Then the certificate of appropriateness would be issued for the current proposal.
Okay. I assume there's a lead time on the window. Is this project has it been bid? Are you ready to go? Is there a construction schedule set that is fixed in terms of other occupancy and all? Steve or Emily?
Yeah, so the residents have moved out because we're doing the bathrooms and they don't have any bathrooms to function. So that's under construction at the moment. And they said, the Salvation Army said, well, as long as they are currently out, this would be a great time to do the window restoration or renovation, replacement. So the drawings are ready to be bid. We're waiting on the decision of this board before we send it out. But the hope is to get this construction done this summer.
So with hearing, I guess this is an advantage of a workshop, right? Although I guess this could have also been a hearing. A direction that we may be going when you come to us in 2 weeks, maybe that gives you time, a couple weeks lead time to start preparing for what we might what we might decide in 2 weeks, so that you could come back April 3rd or whatever, and we can try to turn this around quickly. I know what I'm hearing from Marilyn Kaplan, and what I know I feel is that we don't really want to force this project to drag out because of this situation. But I think that the precedent is really, I think we have to go through this procedure, and it has to be an economic hardship, or else we're setting a very bad, I don't think we're following the ordinance. You know, and it seems to me personally that this is why we have the economic hardship clause in preservation. And I don't tend to defend that clause very often. So
I would think that in terms of some of the economic backup, I mean, you will have, Steve and Emily, you have some sense of a square footage cost for the windows, the type of windows that you're proposing. And you can extrapolate, or with the supplier who you might be working with, you can extrapolate that to, you know, I don't know how many window types you have, but maybe not that many. So if in lieu of this, what would be the cost of that? And then you get to multiply it by that 300 and some. So I think that's probably not going to be that difficult to get. We wouldn't require the bids. And I mean, enough of us are involved in projects that we would know if they're, you know, appropriate numbers that you're using. And then I think a square footage cost in those areas relative to, I don't even know what to say, remove the interior work, which we would like you to add to this list for the economic hardship, which is the removal of ceilings and some other finishes and whatever. And again, that's just a scope and a square footage cost that seems reasonable. So we'd like to have numbers that feel solid, but I don't think the goal is to make it extraordinarily complicated to provide that information, if that all works for you.
We're looking for order of magnitude numbers. So,
Well, just so you fully understand the project, where the green panels are currently, that's where the majority of the failure is happening, because those were not designed properly. The wind load on those are pushing them in, and the majority of the failures are on the perimeter. So what we intend to do is actually infill those openings from the inside with studs. Place the windows in and put the EIFS on the outside, insulate, and drywall on the inside. EIFS on the outside, drywall on the inside. So there's a lot more going on there than just the windows, because new code won't let us put panels of that size in there under current seismic and wind loading characteristics. So it's a pretty significant project, and getting the best way for us to get a number on is to send it out to bid.
Sure.
And we're still inclined to do that, because my gut feeling is we're going to wind up here at some point. And I'd rather have my contractor lined up and moving forward. And if you need to put us through a process because you don't want to approve something now in 2 weeks that might set a precedent that you don't want somebody else to follow, I could understand that. I'm just sort of talking as a business person.
But I think what we're trying to say is we'd like to have reasonable cost information sooner than later, so that when you're ready to go, it's just a nice, smooth sail. And I understand that the bid numbers are the real numbers, but I don't think for the point, this is almost an exercise. And I don't think we really care about the actual bid numbers. We just want some comparative costs that then can be rolled up and totaled that are reasonable, that we could work with. I mean, you could do it either way you want, it's your project, but I think we're trying to help make less work. If, I don't know that you're hearing that, but that's, I think, the intent, my intent anyway.
Sure. If I may ask a question regarding the estimate for infilling the the entire opening, would you be looking for a specific type of window? So right now what we're proposing is a pretty simple, double hung aluminum window. They come in standard sizes. Going up to what I would consider to be a historic replica, it's typically, a replica steel industrial window or an aluminum clad wood window. Are there going to be any requirements in that sense that we should be considering when we're doing that estimate? Because we've done other preservation projects, and I'm frankly quite sympathetic to the plight that you're in. And if it wasn't for the Salvation Army's economic situation, I understand the desire to restore the windows.
Whose windows are you putting in? What'd you spec?
These are Crystal windows. They're a company in New York City.
So it's an interesting question, because the response we would give you is, do we always ask for great, case steel windows that are insulated as it would be in a factory window? And such no, but that would be your highest number for comparison, right? So that would make your case the strongest. But I think at a minimum, we've accepted aluminum windows, some sort of a molded profile for the trim, full height, even if you had a transom, or even if it was a transom and 2 large pieces of glazing. So I don't want you to have to go through the design process to find out what we know you're not going to do. But I think a medium, a good enough window, if not an historic replication window or a historic replicated window, and I think aluminum would be probably something there's likely that we would accept if that's what you were proposing.
Okay.
John, was that an okay answer? Or?
Yeah, I think a good commercial aluminum window. I mean, there have been a lot of examples of large scale aluminum windows used in restoration projects that are fairly monumental. So yeah, an aluminum window is fine. We would anticipate that in an industrial or a commercial building of this magnitude.
And I just did a quick Google search, and I'm not one of the architects on this commission, so Carolyn and John will have there's actually much better specs, but just a quick Google search, and of course this website keeps scrolling through, but there's like the Tremont Street in Boston example, something like they said, you could probably find something like that, but I'm sure you already have the visual of what we're thinking was there, or what would be probably the most appropriate. And what I threw up is not, I was just trying to find something really quickly about, in historic industrial metal windows.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've done, the kind of replica steel sash windows. We've done replica double hungs,
Right.
and depending on whether it's, going to SHPO or NPS or a local commission, sometimes they have different requirements of, exactly what detail that window entails. And that could make, as I'm sure you're aware, a big difference in cost. So just wanted to understand what
I think we all know what the NPS project standards are, and that's a reasonable standard to use for this project.
Okay. Very good. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For the solution that we're not going to get.
Someone to do at some point when there's the funding and the pro forma to make that work.
Well, to the point you made earlier, Aaron, one of the paragraphs in the ordinance, wherever possible, new additions or alterations to structures shall be done in such a manner that such additions or alterations were to be removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the structure would be unimpaired. So even though it's speaking more to volumetric additions to a building, it is an alteration. Is in doing the project, Steve, is it your intent to remove the panel entirely and reconstruct it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We're going to pull out the whole opening, everything within the opening. We're going to do repair of the brick, any masonry or structural repairs, repair the sill as necessary, get a nice, clean, solid opening, and then put our new work back in. But we're not modifying the opening at all.
No, I certainly didn't.
Yeah.
Not a building like that. It's
Yeah.
more work to modify the opening. I was just wondering if you were reusing a lot of the infill elements, or are they being all completely removed back to the
No,
original openings?
it's being completely removed.
All right, so we run down and take photographs after you've removed all the panels.
Sure.
I can't believe that a building that substantial, that we don't have at least the drawings in the city building department or down in the Hall of Records, that somewhere shows an architectural drawing of what it was going to be completed as. It's, I don't know who the architect was, but it's a very substantial building. It's a lot deeper than it looks, and it's a substantial amount of space that's taken up in the footprint.
Yeah.
It's got to be something somewhere that says what it looked like.
I don't know if the Hall of Records is open right now. I don't know.
They're
It is.
open, but I think you have to put a request in and you're not allowed into the building. So.
I was in last month. I was able to make an
Yeah.
appointment.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I know, I,
Tony goes in regularly.
yeah, I know, I went through and I did a deep dive after the pre-application meeting, and I know that Emily had said that she had done extensive research and couldn't find anything either, so. But
The library of the Albany Institute has a great photograph collection. I don't know if they might have a photo. You can't, I don't know if you can go in there yet, but you can email and ask.
okay.
Yes, you can, by hours.
You can go in.
Yeah, they tell you when you can do it. I think it's on Tuesday, and you have to let them know. And of course, there's others up in the John V.L. Prine room of local history, and you can go there as well. Tony Apalka has been working on the fire department and all of its buildings over the years, but you have to pick a time and take an appointment, and you're limited in how long you can stay there.
But you can
But
put,
that's not necessary for Emily and Steve to do their work, right? Just checking.
No,
No.
no, but it would be
Okay.
nice if we knew what was filling the voids.
so
Do we have a path forward here, or enough information for the applicant to move forward with our request?
We don't make any motions or anything in the workshops, right? So
No.
No.
and I will write up the comments from this evening and provide them to Emily and Steve, and then and then the information also for the financial hardship as well.
Thank you. That would be great.
And we do have a meeting on April 3rd and then April 21st. And like I said, we can schedule the April 3rd meet. They're generally being held as workshops, but we have the ability to also hold a public hearing.
Mhm.
Yep. Marilyn, you're muted.
April 7th?
April 3rd and April 21st.
And we have a meeting on the 17th, I assume.
Yeah.
Yes, we will have a public hearing on March 17th. So
Do I have a
Basi-
bad calendar that has April 3rd as a Saturday?
oh, no, I'm sorry. It is, yeah.
Shoot.
April 7th.
Okay, good.
I'm sorry.
That's better.
April 7th
Working.
is the first meeting and April 21st is the
Okay.
second meeting. Thank
I
you.
actually once had a bad calendar.
Aaron, do we have anyone from the public that has?
No one, we generally don't take public comment, and I don't
Yeah, okay.
see anybody, no one signed up, and I think
I see Kara is here.
Kara is here. So I don't know if you have any comments, Kara. Raise your hand if you do. But yep, so there's no action taken tonight. If you all have any other comments before we let them go.
Only that, Emily and Steve, if you have kind of a draft, I think that provides the level of information that we've been talking about. And if you want to get it to Aaron sooner than later, Aaron, you could kind of circulate it and receive comments back. So if that's helpful to you.
You're saying circulate the hardship information?
Yeah, if you have, I'll send the requirements to you. If Marilyn is saying if you draft something up and send it back to me, I can circulate it and they can provide comments on it. I guess.
So that when at the next meeting, we've kind of jumped ahead a bit. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to take any action until you take action. So in other words, you have to reject it first, and then we'll submit the hardship. I don't think we want to submit any information prior to that.
Okay, so that would officially happen on the 17th.
Correct. Any other comments from anyone? All right.
No?
Well, I will write those up and get the comments to you as quickly as possible with the hardship information and any next steps that need to be considered. So.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Is there a change when we got our last ordinance? Didn't it used to go to the council, the hardships?
No, they've
It's
always,
Always at this-
It always came to the commission.
No.
yeah.
Oh.
Way
It-
back in the early days of the commission, we had an accountant that was on the commission, and that was helpful.
Yeah, we've talked about this in the office. When I was in Houston, we had a real estate agent on the board as well. And that was helpful because when applicants came forward, especially for demolitions, one of the criteria is kind of a value assessment. And so that's always very helpful because they can they understand the market and valuation of properties. So, and project valuations. So that's very helpful to have somebody who can crunch those numbers.
Well, my assumption is that the comparison of numbers will be so great that we'll feel comfortable with that. It's kind of interesting because, it's a nonprofit. I mean, none of us are accountants and we're not running great numbers and pro formas, et cetera, et cetera. And we won't need to do that here, but other times, certainly in terms of hardship, says who, right? Is $50,000 a hardship? Is $500,000 a hardship? I don't know. Depends. But anyway, I don't think that's going to be our situation.
We're also not holding them up because they have all that bathroom work to continue. I have not heard the word asbestos once. I was afraid to even ask.
I I have to say, when he started talking about how they were taking out the full panels, that whole argument about the drop ceiling sort of went away. As he's saying that, I'm thinking to myself, oh, like,
Yes. Yeah.
this might not actually be as much more expensive as they think. Not that we want to go back, but it did.
No, but does it speak to a different window configuration and more, and still the same percentage of infill, but configure the windows differently? Because those silly little squat windows just look ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
They're so bad.
The natural light not benefit the space. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that a trade-off there?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad she asked the question about what window would you accept. So she kind of knew that it was going to be an expensive window. If it was going to be a Park Service type approval, she got that. So that was good rather than just going to whatever crystal, anyway.
Well, I don't think they can stack up a whole bunch of crystals and make it work, so.
No.
All right. So Jack had brought this up and then Lee had brought it up again in an email this week, the project at 152 Washington. And John had reached out and asked if we could just kind of briefly go over the difference between National Register districts and designations versus local designations and the kind of purview and jurisdiction of the Historic Resource Commission. So I did send out a packet and it did have kind of a lot of information in it this afternoon that I had gone through and grabbed. So the local designations generally fall under local ordinance and the jurisdiction of the local Historic Review Commission, in this case, the HRC. And therefore, for properties in historic districts or individual landmarks, for any type of exterior alteration, material change, those properties have to go through a design review and receive a certificate of appropriateness before any changes or permits can be issued for a project. The National Register designations are more kind of like an honorary designation. They're more kind of a statement that, yes, this property is significant to either the local development, statewide, or nationally. I mean, the designation kind of criteria for both kind of local and the National Register are fairly similar. But the way in which that they're enforced or recognized is different. So unless there's public funding involved with a property that's located in a National Register district, there's no real design exterior oversight. The public funding does require it to go either to the state level through the State Historic Preservation Office or the National, the Parks Service.
Advisory Council.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. To determine whether the alterations are appropriate or if there's adverse impact on a property. And for most communities, they have both locally designated properties and state and national, and they're either separate or they work together and they're overlaid. And we see that in Albany, where we have, a combination of both. In regards to the Washington Avenue property, that's the Washington Avenue Corridor District is only a National Register district. So that property was also only using private funds. So it did not have to go before SHPO or MPS for review. It did go before the planning board for review for the conversion to apartments. And because it's not in a local district, it did not fall under the jurisdiction of the HRC. And the other thing that comes up a lot with between locally designated districts and national register districts is also the demolition impact, where HRC has a demolition review, and for most properties in national register districts, they don't go through a review process. Within Albany, we do send all of our demolition reviews outside of historic districts to the planning board. So in some cases, in some communities, there's no oversight. Property owners can pull a building permit and demolish property. It's not the case in Albany, which is great. We made sure that was included in the sustainability, the USDO rezone process. In the packet, I did include kind of a side-by-side comparison. Actually, it's from the state of Louisiana Preservation Office, and I do really like it kind of as a example that lays out kind of clearly like what the process is between both of them, what's similar, what's different. And then also the state frequently asked questions from New York SHPO. For the city of Albany, we do have the process where, local designations come from the commission, from the planning office or the commission. They can also come from local property owners. But we have the ability the HRC has the ability to initiate designation. So pretty much putting together a statement of, yes, this neighborhood or this property is significant. We would hold a hearing, we would notify the property owners, hold a hearing. We would then forward on our recommendations to the mayor and the common council. And then the common council would, be the official body that would designate. But that process does start with the HRC. And within the preservation plan, and John had asked earlier, if you do go through the preservation plan, starting on page 32 through 73, it does list out all of the National Register districts and properties, and then all the local districts and properties. And you kind of will see in that those maps that where the overlay is of where we have both locally and nationally designated districts. And that is within the preservation plan, we did also identify areas that we would like to see surveyed, and then the possibility of designating them both locally and nationally. The one thing with state and national register districts is that they do open up funding for rehab projects. So that generally is kind of the first designation that a lot of people are attracted to, because there is that those funds available for projects. Because we're a certified local government through the State Preservation Office, can certify our local districts, which then offers those funding options to property owners.
Erin, can you pull that map up easily or not?
Yes.
So I feel like, the building, I think Lee initiated the conversation, and of course, I know he's not here, but that's come up before. I don't know, I think it's just a project that people are particularly incensed about.
It's very visible, which I think.
Very visible. And I guess, I mean, I think in the email, I expressed my 2 cents on this, which is, some cities like Elmira just automatically designate anything that goes on the National Register, which is not recommended.
Erin, I was so surprised you wrote that. Can you explain? I wanted to ask you that question.
Surprised I wrote that cities do that, or that it's not recommended?
It's not recommended by the league. Can you speak to that?
Oh, yeah. It's also not recommended by SHPO.
Right.
Because it's confusing enough. I mean, like the fact that Aaron Glennon just went through that, there's still this confusion between local and national designation. And we work very hard to, in outreach, to differentiate between the two. And I always make a point, they're separate buckets of designation. They serve different purposes. One requires owner approval. One, you should not have owner approval in order to be a CLG. So they're very, very different types of designation. So the automatic conflating of one with the other, it actually really harms the National Register side, and I just don't think it's helpful. And I think that they serve such different purposes. There's neighborhoods that qualify for the National Register that would probably not be a great choice for local historic district or
Right.
local designation. So, I mean, just so many reasons. Churches are a big example of, something that communities might be reluctant to designate, but in order to encourage them and to really try to encourage preservation viewed in a positive way and not in a taking away of property rights way, or not in a now I have to go through this process sort of way, but this is an encouraging positive thing where you can qualify for tax credits, you can qualify for grants. That's why it's so important to keep them separate. All of that said, I don't know, there must have been a designation in the last 15 years, right? What have we listed? I mean, other cities actually designate like multiple properties or districts every single year.
Right.
And I can't, certainly not in the last 5 or 6 years that I can think of. I don't know what.
There's been a number of National Register nominations.
Not National Register, I'm talking about local.
Right, locally, and I'm trying to, it has to be either the Upper Madison Avenue district, because, and I say that because I only have digital files for that nomination. So there's no paper files, which means it probably has to have been in like the last 10 to 15 years.
It's not on the map.
What Upper Madison?
Oh, Upper Madison. Sorry,
Madison
hold on. There's an Upper Madison. Yeah, Chris Hacker lives in the district.
What?
It is.
Are you talking about Upper Madison and Pine Hills? Oh, you're talking about the block just
number
west
15. So it's where actually the
the
Women's
Women's
Club
Club.
borders it, but it's where the Damien Center is and the Quaker building.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
the Upper Madison Historic District, and it's a local district.
I think that was designated when I was at Historic Albany. That was a local district.
Can you zoom into this, Erin?
Let me see.
Erin Tobin, as well as Aaron Glennon spoke and you spoke, I still don't get it. So to me, there's two different directions. There's local going up to national, and in the other direction is the national kind of heading down to the local. And it's easy to understand that all local districts are not NR eligible. I get that, and that's where the owner consent and a lot of stuff comes. But where's the problem if you've got something that's if that's listed on the National Register? Why wouldn't you want those boundaries locally?
Because
I'm just missing it.
Well, I guess it depends, and I'm saying this as a member of a local commission, on what you think the role of local designation is. And I think it's if you want it, what it will do is it will diminish the number of National Register listings because you'll have fierce opposition to anything being designated. Because some communities don't want local designation, and maybe, local designation, as we all know, does place some sort of a burden on the property owner. And so there's a lot of situations where that might not be the best preservation tool. So maybe eventually National Register districts do become local, but it's great when that happens organically because the community wants it. And we're really focused on not being top down in what is designated, but having those decisions come from the neighborhoods and the communities. So if a neighborhood wants local designation in conjunction with National Register, nothing's stopping them. But when it's mandated that everything on the National Register automatically becomes local, it takes away that community and that neighborhood's agency to make those choices. So
is it possible, say, in the city of Albany, which is not new to the historic preservation business, right? So I certainly understand what you're saying in a new community where they've never dealt with any of this before. But is it possible that we should be looking then at each of these districts and maybe they're not all the same, right? And so what happens at the north end of the city is not the same as what's going to happen in the mansions or wherever else around Washington Avenue or Western Avenue. So isn't it worth looking at each of those districts, because some may be ready, some may benefit,
Right.
and others it's just too restrictive or whatever else that you're laying out.
Yeah, I will say one of the things you will see this in communities is that when development pressure starts to grow in some of these districts that may only be national register districts, that communities will come forward and say, we need to designate locally in order to make sure that any new development is sympathetic to the character of the neighborhood. We're not losing more fabric. When I lived in Houston, we had a national register district that was an early Freeman's colony and wasn't locally designated, and it's gone. So, that's kind of one of those things when you see pressure growing and loss of fabric, then hopefully you can get to it early. But in a lot of cases, those neighborhoods are then saying, well, pause, like, wait a minute, like, we need to do something. But like Erin said, the Washington Avenue corridor district failed the first time and went forward for designation because of fear that property owners were not going to be able to do what they wanted with their buildings. And they really were afraid that designation was going to be too much oversight, and they didn't understand that the National Register designation was not going to require that they come before the HRC or go through an additional application process. Luckily, the second time that Historic Albany Foundation went forward, it passed, but there is a great kind of misunderstanding of what the two different designations are.
From an owner's point of view, I can see where taking the building, which used to be the business council, and that it was worth their while to say, we're now on the National Register so we can get tax credits. But by the way, we're going to cut through the walls on Duff Street for a new use, and nobody can stop us from doing that because we're not going to put any tax credits into that. It's not a federal or state funded activity. So they wind up in terms of freedom of function, they wind up with the best of both worlds. At some point, they're going to want to have a tax credit. Well, you're on the National Register. How can you go wrong? On the other hand, if you want to go and not look for federal money to do the work or state money to do the work, you just cut through the wall because the local jurisdiction has no control over it.
Well, I can say to going for tax credits, if there's not a significant amount of historic fabric left, that it can be harder to qualify for tax credits.
So Erin, Glennon, are there any of our districts that you think would benefit? Not all of them. Are there any that would benefit from having local designation?
I would have to go through and really take a look at what's just locally designated. I think we have like a good number of our districts are both locally and nationally designated. There's maybe, let me just, sorry, maybe a handful that is only nationally designated. And I've been thinking about this. Like Knox Street is only a national register, but I think it's fairly stable. We don't see a lot of, you know, work coming through for exterior changes to those properties. You know, unfortunately, the Broadway Livingston district, there's not a ton of fabric left. And what is there, you know, it's just recently been rehabbed. So I kind of would have to go through and look and see, you know, what is only in our national register designated. I kind of have a good idea where they're, you know, where permits are coming out of, because I do have to review those for citywide design standards. And I would say that probably a lot of our individually designated national register districts don't have a lot of stuff coming out of them. It's really kind of those areas that we have identified to survey, but aren't designated either locally or on the national register.
So go on, Erin.
I was gonna say, so Rapp Road is a historic district.
Yes.
I don't think personally that I don't see that as a candidate for local designation. And then this Washington Ave National Register district, which honestly, despite all what the owners were afraid of, that would be my candidate for local designation. Like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a national register district and then locally designating it. I just think it has to be a separate process. So that seems to me the ripest for local designation would be the easiest lift. It's where, you know, because I'm also aware of equity issues, and I don't know, for example, that that's just a thing to consider, but I don't see that in this Washington Ave corridor. And who knows that the Fort Orange Club isn't going to want to start tearing down more buildings sometime soon. So maybe we would designate it now before they do.
And one of the things too is that the boundaries don't necessarily have to match, right? So the HRC could identify slightly different boundaries than the National Register district. I mean, it's easy as there's already a report there. There's already, you know, a statement of significance. So those boundaries are identified and those buildings are identified. And it seems like the previous process is to kind of just take that report and say, you know, that meets local standards, put it to the council, you know, go through the process first of holding public hearings, but, put that forward to the council and say, we would like to designate, you know, the same boundaries as the National Register district. But there's, you know, the HRC can say, maybe we want to extend the boundaries to include a larger swath of properties, or we want to reduce the boundaries to include, you know, just the commercial corridor.
It would seem to me that under whatever our goal is relative to the historic designations, I think our work is really about protecting buildings, right? And the architectural character of those buildings. And so whether it's the example that Lee brought us brings us to an area to look at, we'd really like to have a little bit more involvement there, or whether there are some new areas that, Erin, I think you've had a list of, Erin Glennon, for a while, of potential districts, local or NR. We haven't done much work in terms of protecting buildings through designation, whatever kind of designation it is. And it seems like there's two different paths there, at least two, right? One is, are there places that we can get appropriate more control, a level of control on by taking the NR and bringing it local? And the other is new districts, and whether they're local or NR is a different, that's a more detailed discussion, but that's our job. And we haven't been doing that.
Well, and I put specifically put in the HRC's kind of rules and procedures into that packet, because it does clearly state that, you know, some of the roles of the HRC is to do survey work and to identify these properties and districts that we should be looking at, either to survey or to designate. And, you know, one of the big things, I mean, it's usually in every preservation plan, but I really wanted a list of areas identified, because it didn't seem previously that there was really any clear path as to how the city was identifying and designating districts when they did. It seemed like when the National Register nomination would come forward, then we would initiate the designation process for the local. So it, like, I think having a list makes it easy to go forward with designation.
And prioritizing that list based on where we see the vulnerabilities or the less fortunate solutions.
Right.
Pine Hills is a classic example. I mean, you're dealing with century-old. But where is Manning Boulevard now, for example, where the bridle path is? I mean, there's plenty of justification, I would think, for taking some or all of it and putting it on the National Register. I could see where the people who like to carve these buildings up into unfortunate examples of slumlords, I could see where they would certainly would not want to see a local designation, but National Register might be less painful, because it could mean if you do it the right way, we can get you tax credits.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, you know, the National Register districts are usually, they're that carrot, they're, you know, that incentive to recognize the significance of your building and do appropriate work, because you can then go for the credits.
So Jack, to kind of the counter to that would be, I don't think I've seen much on Manning that takes my breath away in a bad way, right? So we don't, I don't regularly see, so yes, it would be, I understand the discussion of the designation, but would that be our first area of focus? Given?
Well, I think if you're talking about endangered, you'd look at Quail Street in the student ghetto.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Thank you.
And it depends on how far forward you want to go as an example. You may also want it just as an example of what people on South Pine Avenue would feel if they suddenly realized it was different. They're not in real tough shape, but there's a few that are absentee owned that are not maintained. And if you take a look at the pattern of the Pine Hills associations that were set up, 1900, there was a Pine Hills Association there because they were sick of them going out to what was called 19th Street and dumping the dead horses there. That was out past Winthrop Avenue. You know, there's different reasons, but I think if we got some that were clearly identifiable as exceptionally nice, then you could carry through the ones that are very much endangered and not appreciated.
And I'm just going to throw out, I mean, I think if we're talking about national versus local, there's that NR versus local, there's two different purposes too. You know, Manning Boulevard would be a great, easy one to get because it could, you know, make people feel warm and fuzzy about preservation. And then there's also the survey that I think Historic Albany just finished. Actually, is that the most recent designation, the Upper Washington Ave? I wish Kara.
That's what I was thinking before.
Yeah, that's the most recent one.
Right.
And looking at Central Ave and, you know, what for National Register designation also, you know, where are the surveys and where would be the easiest lifts to start getting more NR. Our Albany, the city of Albany, compared to other cities across New York State, is woefully lacking in both national register districts and local districts, but especially national register districts. Our percentage of historic buildings that are covered by a national register district compared to almost every other city I can think of is very, very small. And all of the other cities are getting at, maybe Utica. Utica might have fewer things. We're a little bit ahead of Utica. So that, just to give you a little perspective, I mean, and that's the, you know, so I think this is a good time for this commission because there's the Preserve New York grant program coming up, and I can't really participate in those conversations on either end, but it might be worth considering. And maybe Erin Glennon, if there's a workshop, and I'll just not attend that one, for discussion of that, you know, focusing on the other district on the National Register that should be ready to go is Delaware Ave. I know SHPO might want to see some expanded survey work there, but that would be another great kind of already done. Kim already surveyed that 14, 15 years ago. And
I think we have like a portion that needs to be surveyed and to make it one contiguous district.
I really am curious about the conservation districts. In any way, could that be like a primer to a local district to kind of give a neighborhood or a community an opportunity to?
We've also looked at it as a way of maybe they don't qualify as a local district, or that's not the way that the neighborhood wants to go, but having a conservation district, which is generally like a historic district light, is there a way to overlap those with NR districts? You know, there may be a set of regulations. It can either be set by the city, it can be set by the neighborhood.
Well, concerns have been set by the neighborhood. You know, that seems where we get some pushback.
Well, one of the things, like,
well, contributing buildings.
Local. Some design reviews use neighborhood design standards. So one of the things I thought was whether or not we have kind of like a blanket set of criteria for conservation districts, or is it more neighborhood driven and they can kind of set their own conservation standards that kind of address that specific neighborhood, and how they would like to see either infill or how they would like to see treatment of materials. But I think it is another great tool. Conservation districts are another great tool to use in order to, you know, protect and make sure to protect material that's existing, and then also make sure that any infill is appropriate and sensitive to the neighborhood.
And Albany had an equivalent, which I always used as an example, and I think it disappeared in the
not fully. So we did have the traditional neighborhood overlay district. We dissolved the boundaries, but we kept the standards, and they're now citywide design standards. So
what does that mean? That because back in the overlay district, that meant that if you wanted to enclose your porch, you had to go get a variance. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Really?
Yep.
And no new construction with garages in front, and
the traditional neighborhood never got into that specifically, but the neighborhood zoning will. So the district zones kind of speaks to like property, like your setbacks. But I do think there may have been a couple of properties kind of with that configuration, front loading garages, but the design standards kind of speak to retention of original materials to the best of their ability. It talks about appropriate alterations to exterior features and such. Kind of the form-based code and some of the zoning boundaries or districts kind of touch on placement of construction on lots.
Mhm.
Is my memory correct that there's a lot of the beginnings of this discussion written in the preservation plan?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This feels to me to be a really important discussion. And I don't know, John, how you want to, if you want to need smaller groups or how you want, or should we review the preservation plan for our next workshop or what? But
Yeah.
this feels like a significant conversation because we haven't been doing this. We haven't been protecting our buildings.
Right.
Can we have a list for our starting point for discussion at our next workshop, Erin, of what was laid out in the preservation plan? It'd be great to see what the planning, what the list is of prioritized local destination and districts and our districts so that we could continue.
I don't know that we listed them out as prioritized for, take that back. I think it is listed out in the survey areas, but the recommendation is we need to survey. Like we
Right.
really need to survey our neighborhoods and find out what fabric we have. And that's, I think one of the biggest issues with the fact that like we haven't been designating it is because we don't have a very good survey background of knowing what we have and where within the city we should be looking at and prioritizing. We do now because we have the preservation plan, but
when is the next round of CLG grants due?
April 2nd.
Is the city planning on applying for a section?
We've been talking about applying because we're currently working on the warehouse district. We were thinking about doing maybe more educational documents, but we have also talked about when we need to finalize whether or not we're going to move forward. I think we had applied last year for the Delaware and we didn't move forward with the Delaware. So it might be, we finished the survey work for the warehouse district and do the Delaware Avenue district.
So you're doing the warehouse district in-house?
No, we are going out for consultant. We did not get funding initially, but there were funds available. And so now we're kind of playing catch up to get that project out and get it finished.
I don't know if we'll be able to meet again in time, but I guess I would just put out there, Buffalo hasn't really done a citywide survey, but Rochester and Syracuse have done citywide surveys through the CLG program. And certainly talk to Dan, but I would really strongly recommend taking a quadrant of the city or whatever he really recommends and doing that reconnaissance survey and focusing on trying to get a citywide survey done. And you could go to Preserve New York for the smaller districts. You could go to Preserve New York for a citywide survey too, but CLG funds are much more robust than Preserve New York. And
right.
We could help with Delaware Ave or, it sounds like Warehouse is already done or on its way, but I guess wearing both hats, I would recommend that citywide survey, because if that's what we need to know as a commission to figure out what to designate,
right.
and
yeah,
hopefully they can give you a bunch of money, like $30,000-$40,000 to really get a big section done.
Because some of the areas are very large, and I know that you and I had discussed Pine Hills when the consultants were here and looking at Pine Hills and how do you identify Pine Hills? What are the actual boundaries? Does it include Winchester Gables? Does it not?
Rochester did it in quadrants.
Okay.
They did it in literally, Rochester is laid out a little more conveniently because of that, but they literally, and I don't know, you might want to talk to Kate and see what they did in Syracuse, but they literally took each quadrant and tackled it one at a time.
I just want to say that I don't think the reason that we haven't done any designations is because we don't have a survey, because the survey is really one of the initial steps. I think we just haven't had any drivers for it. No one's said it was important enough to them to take on. We haven't. Historic Albany either hasn't, or staffing limitations, the neighborhood. So I don't think it's because we don't have a survey.
I think that is why NR. I think there's a multiple, so not speaking for local, and I haven't been on the commission for that long, but in terms of the National Register, you know, a decade ago, Kara and I tried to get a Manning Boulevard in our district. I think probably Kara, me, maybe Aaron Glennon have all tried to get a Pine Hills in our district. I think a lot of it is neighborhood. I think that's why we want it. If we could pick off a low hanging fruit from that end.
Right.
But I think I'd really love to, as a commission, to talk about local districts and where we could, you know, and there was a conversation a couple years ago when I first joined about Holland Ave, because
Right.
Yeah.
that would be a really good local district and do exactly what local districts say, but there is some pushback on that. So I don't know. I do believe that the reason for that no NR designations is partly because of the survey issue. And I think it's so almost so overwhelming.
Yeah. And it's a lot of money. Like, and that's one of the things as well.
But I think it's achievable.
Yes.
And the problem is that SHPO has really gone to wanting these comprehensive surveys before really looking at any NR district boundaries. And that's created big hurdles for communities like Albany, which is then also.
So prior to having the full survey, which would be our most informed basis of making decisions, we've got, we can develop a list or a map to show us the NR districts and the local districts. And we can add to that what Aaron already knows in terms of possible additions or expansions. I mean, we can kind of start to develop our own list. And I would assume that you can't do them all at once. So it will be somewhere between where's work already been done, where's the low hanging fruit, or where's the greatest need. But so we're going to have to grapple with that before we get the full survey, even though it's an imperfect process.
So I will send you before April. We will have an application on the agenda for the April workshop. But I will add this to the workshop agenda as well. And I will send you from the preservation plan,
That's great.
the list of locally designated properties and districts and National Register properties and districts. And then also the list of survey areas that
That's
we've
great.
identified. And I believe, I'll go back and I'll check. I know it's someplace they're identified as either being candidates for local National Register or conservation districts. So.
And send the link, when you send that, Aaron, would you send the link to that section of the plan for everyone? Because I think reading it will give some good background.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, if you want to look at the maps and the list of existing resources, that starts on page 32 and goes through page 73 of the preservation plan.
Okay.
So if you need a link to the preservation plan, let me know. I can, and I'll just send it out, actually. Yeah.
Great.
And then the list of surveys is under section 4 of the preservation plan. So
We'll ask our roving reporter Lee to give us the list of worst projects in the city, and we'll kind of overlay that for
Target areas.
yeah,
our target areas.
you only get the emails. I get emails and text messages from him. So of pictures
I've been
of
on that
buildings.
list before. Yeah, that's great.
Pictures of building and being like, who approved this?
That's great. We miss him today.
Yes.
But But yeah, I think it would be, I'll send out the list, but I think, if you can start looking at, the lists and the maps and things, prior to April, that would be very good so that we can have a, constructive conversation.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this has been exactly the sort of conversation that we want to have and need to have to move these efforts forward. Thank you for putting that document together to clarify the NR and the locally designated districts.
Yeah.
I
Really helpful.
clearly was a little lost as to the distinction between the two.
It can be a very confusing process, and so.
Yeah, there's almost an assumption national has to be a higher level and the local has to be a lower level. And in many ways, it's the exact opposite.
Mhm.
Well, in terms of scrutiny, yeah.
Yeah,
You can own a national registered property, and if you don't go for funds or licensure of a public nature, then you can go carte blanche. No one's going to
and
look over what you're doing.
and Aaron used the term almost honorary, which it is in some cases.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but it
So
is.
the Rap Road example that Aaron
Yeah,
gave
Mhm.
us was really helpful. It kind of really, right. Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah.
And I will say, there's going to be a camp training, in partly funded through the Preservation League,
Mhm.
and it's the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. It's going to be a 2-day training. Aaron, is at the end of March, 29th? Do you know?
I think it's the end of March. Something
It's-
came through.
Yeah, March 29th and March 31st. Sorry, I just,
Yeah,
and
it's Christina's wheelhouse, so
okay. But this is the same training that they did for the State Preservation Conference
Mhm.
2 years ago now. But it'll go over, if you didn't get the email, I was going to send it out anyways, just to cover everybody, but I think it's $30. I would highly encourage you all to attend it. And they do a very good job. So, but I think they do go over kind of the standards and guidelines, and other kind of roles of commissions and design standards. So
Our discussions on materials, appropriate materials, and
mhm,
design review processes. So
yeah. And I
Is there
think,
anything on the schedule, on the agenda for vacant buildings and property maintenance and emergency demos, all of that?
no,
on
it's
the camp agenda, but
No, is it on the, come on, those are good agenda topics for 2 days of
oh
training.
yeah,
It
no,
says legal standards and guidelines, meeting procedures, role of the commissioner, infill construction, alternative materials, and then I'm excited about it, but mid-century modern resources. So
you know who did a great vacant building program probably 5 years ago? NICOM did it wasn't really open to the public, but that would be an interesting thing to think about, Marilyn, whether we want to partner with NICOM again on vacant buildings. They have a slightly different bent than we do, but so good. And
Wow.
that's the sort of meaty conversation. Preservation League probably wouldn't do something like that for another year because we are booked.
we could, if one of those comes up, we can invite Rich LaJoy to join us on that.
Yeah, that would be nice. That would be nice. Maybe in the fall or winter.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested in a whole other capacity through APT of trying to figure out where are the communities in the country who are taking different approaches to their vacant buildings and more proactive in protecting them. I think it's not that they don't have the codes. I think it's really about how they enforce and what resources they use. So we're starting to talk about that in these other capacities. But yeah, it's certainly one of our issues in upstate, downstate.
All right.
Would
Well-
anyone like to pose a motion to adjourn or
No, we're not at a meeting.
do the discussion? What?
No
Do we make a
motions.
motion to adjourn? Do we just leave?
Oh, I guess we can just leave.
Thank you.
Just walk away and get dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, nice to see you all. Good discussions.
Nice to see you all.
Yeah,
You're in a different
thank you.
spot today,
Thank you
Marilyn.
all.
Yeah, it'll be
I'm in-
acceptable.
Yeah, I'm in Tucson.
Yeah, it'll be acceptable
I-
to
I
show
thought
up with an
like-
Irish coffee on the 17th too.
Yeah.
Okay, bye, everybody.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Erin.
Thank you. All right. Oh, hold on. Let me stop.